time when India is exercising its options, looking at every possible response to Pakistan. I'm joined by Ambassador John Bolton, former National Security Advisor in the previous term of President Trump, joining me this evening on the News Hour. Good evening, Mr. Bolton, and thank you very much for joining me. It is quite evident that India has kept all options on the table, including the possibility of a strong military response, as it believes the Pahalgam terror attack has a clear Pakistani imprint. Where do you see America standing if India does exercise this option and retaliate?
Well, so far, I think the highest level statement has come from Vice President J.D. Vance, who has simply called on both sides to exercise restraint. I have to say, based on my own experience with terrorist attacks across the border into India over a sustained period of time, a number of them have obviously come from terrorist organizations that are based inside Pakistan. And this really is the responsibility of the government of Pakistan to control and prevent these military incursions for terrorist purposes or otherwise. So I think India has a clear right of self-defense. I'm not sure any of us are fully aware of all the circumstances here, and I think it's important to get that straight. But if in fact this attack was launched from Pakistani national territory, the right of self-defense includes being free from terrorist attacks, even by organizations not connected with the government of Pakistan, if Pakistan itself can't control its own territory.
So I'm asking you this question also because both in 2016 and 2019, India had retaliated military following two sets of terror attacks in Uri and in Pulwama, and followed by surgical strikes and the Balakot airstrikes that took place in northwest Pakistan. You had said at that time that India had a right to defend itself. Do you see the Trump administration at this moment veering around to the same position that it had then?
Well, I don't know. And of course, it was the 2019 incident that I had specifically in mind. The personnel are different in the Trump administration now, particularly J.D. Vance and some others. I think at the time in 2019, then Secretary of State Pompeo and I were both on the phone to Ajit Doval and others in the government of India, and we communicated all of this to President Trump, who agreed with the position that I've just explained a moment ago. So if he's consistent with what he did in 2019, then I think Trump would support India's right of self-defense. But I must say there's a different cast of characters around him now. It changed again yesterday in Washington with the departure of Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. So I can only recur to the 2019 incident and I think the very strong position we took then. That should be the position of the United States and the Trump administration. Let me put it that way.
You have your ear to the ground even today. Do you think at this point in time there's any proof that is required to be given to Pakistan? Because people have seen the involvement of Pakistan since 9/11, 26/11. We've seen Tahavvur Rana's episode. We've seen Ajmal Kasab's episode. We've seen Osama bin Laden, there in Abbottabad, and who better than the United States of America to know what kind of terror networks do operate out of Pakistan? Do you think there's still space for this dossier exchange that we've done in the past has led us nowhere, even at this point?
Well, I understand why it might seem frustrating, but I think from India's point of view, it's always better to document with the most compelling case you can what the source is of the terrorist attack, and indeed all the accompanying evidence you can find, because there's a continuing debate in the international space about these matters. And, if you have truth on your side, it's a good idea to marshal it and have it available for anybody who might be interested in the truth. And I will say as well, I am very worried about a number of things that are happening inside Pakistan. The the problems with getting free and fair elections, the independence of the judiciary, and what I'm afraid is the increasing influence of China. So I think it's important for people in Pakistan to understand what is going on in their country, to hear from voices other than internal Pakistani voices about where these attacks come from, because there are people who are going to look at the facts around the world and across the border in Pakistan too. So I would urge the government of India to continue to do these dossiers, to pull the facts together, because I think it strengthens India's case internationally.
But do you see a little change in the attitude of the United States of America? President Donald Trump continues to be generous to Pakistan, including pledging $400 million for its F-16 fleet. The U.S. says it is strictly for counter-terrorism. But many would ask, is U.S. being naive in this situation?
Well, I don't think we're being naive. We may be mistaken, but I personally would continue to support providing assistance to Pakistan. I think it's very important for the United States. I mean, you know the history and how far back it goes, but it's very important to the extent we can, consistent with our principles, to have a voice and close contact with the government of Pakistan, to reduce the chance that China's influence is going to increase. I'm not saying that we are necessarily the answer. I think that's almost certainly not true. But I think if we were absent, the Chinese influence would grow. That's not in the U.S. interest, and I just suggest it's not in India's interest either.
So let me then ask you, what do you make of the recent statements that have come out by the defense minister of Pakistan, who says that they actually, for the last 3 decades, have been harboring terrorists, training them at the behest of the United States of America and other European countries, including the UK. It's an admission that came at a time when there was heightened tensions between India and Pakistan, and the worst-kept secret came tumbling out.
Yeah, well, I don't know what he has in mind about the role of the U.S. or the UK, for that matter. Look, this is the question in Kashmir of Indian sovereignty is one that Pakistan has repeatedly challenged. We've seen the support for terrorists from elements of the Pakistani government in Afghanistan over a long period of time. I think it's a question that it's overdue for the government of Pakistan to address. I hope they would, and I hope they come out the right way. But it's because of the importance of the region. It's obviously important to India being on your border. It's also important to the U.S. because of the attacks we've suffered from terrorists, like the attacks India suffered, and the threat that terrorist-controlled Afghanistan right now poses around the world. And what would be worse than a government of Pakistan truly taken over by terrorists or under the dominance of China?
It's not just the dominance of China that is Pakistan's problem. Practically speaking, the government currently in Pakistan isn't really the popular government. And the Pakistani army actually calls the shots in Pakistan, again, the worst-kept secret of Pakistan. At such a time, with your experience and with your ear to the ground, do you really think Pakistan is going to take any so-called right decision in the eyes of the world?
Well, you don't know until you ask them or talk to them about it. I think that's for sure. And I think this is a question that is going to require persistence, and persistence on the part of India, persistence on the part of the United States. But I think it's also the case inside Pakistan. Everybody knows the history. It's why they call the military the steel skeleton in Pakistan, no doubt about it. But I think the people want a democratic form of government, and I think that maintaining the contacts that we have gives strength to those people, whether they're pro-U.S. or anti-U.S., and there are a whole range of different views among the Pakistani people. But fundamentally, what we want is a government in Pakistan that suppresses this terrorism directed against friends and allies and stands against Chinese intervention. twin threats, but in many respects they're related because the Chinese can take advantage of turmoil inside Pakistan to increase their influence. And I just think it's important that we make it clear how worried and opposed we are to that.
Do you think, that's a possibility, or do you think that bridge was crossed a long time ago? In fact, China controls Pakistan more than anything. Are we not seeing the writing on the wall? Are we still indulging in niceties?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it's a difficult situation, but the stakes are very high. And, over the years in the back and forth in relations between U.S. and India, when often we had good relations with Pakistan, bad relations with India, I do think after 9/11, we were able to move past that and have relations not based on the Pakistan-India standoff, but on, in our case, direct U.S.-India relations, which has been very beneficial for both countries. And I don't think it's naive to hope that we can do the same thing with the government of Pakistan, because a truly terrorist government in Pakistan would be doing a lot more across the Indian border than what's happening now, and a Pakistan controlled by China would be almost an existential threat to India. So frustrating though it may be, and however slow the progress is, my view is this is one of these situations where you just have to keep at it.
True, but how do you see the role of the United Nations Security Council? The fact that the TRF, the proxy terror organization of Lashkar-e-Toiba, first took responsibility for the Pahalgam massacre, and Pakistan actually standing there and gloating over the fact that they made the UNSC not even mention them in the statement. How does that really reflect on the United Nations Security Council?
Well, it doesn't reflect well, but I have to say that's nothing new or different based on my own experience as U.S. ambassador to the UN. You could expect that China would make it clear that they would object to any presidential statement or resolution that was objectionable to Pakistan, and I think that's ultimately what was produced. Like much that comes out of the Security Council, it was just a form of words that nobody paid any attention to.
How do you read the situation as at this moment? The Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, has said in no uncertain terms that the perpetrators of the terror attack will have to be brought to justice. And he said that he's going to unmask the terror network in Pakistan. Where do you see this going? Do you think a military action is absolutely possible?
Well, I think it is possible. I think at this moment, as I understand it, I would say the ball is in Pakistan's court, and this is a point where they could de-escalate. They could say, "Look, we are going to take steps. We're willing to resume international air flights, for example." Let's see what they do. Maybe they'll do the right thing here. If not, as I've said repeatedly, I do think India has a right to self-defense, because it's not simply looking at reprisal for this particular horrible attack which killed so many tourists, but for India and visitors to India to be safe from terrorism. And that kind of self-defense obviously involves something more than just a one-off retaliatory strike. I hope that doesn't happen. It would not happen if the Pakistani government would get these groups under control, or better yet, disband them and cut off whatever assistance may be flowing to them from ISI or other parts of the Pakistani government. That's what we've got to keep working to do, because the kinds of attacks we've just seen are simply not the way civilized nations should behave. We've seen what happens when terrorism gets out of control, and we don't want to see that happen here.
Is military retaliation inevitable? I ask you this question again because to imagine that Pakistan is going to de-escalate is probably asking for the moon to be served along with the stars. Do you think that's possible?
Well, look, I think in aid of self-defense, military retaliation is certainly permissible. Whether it's inevitable, I think is too hard to predict at this point. I hope it's not. I think we would all worry about a much broader escalation. And that's why, to go back to one of your earlier questions, it's important for India to make the case where this terrorism originated from, so that if there is military retaliation, there's no ambiguity of the reason why India is doing it.
I want to ask you, President Trump recently said, I'm very close to India and I'm very close to Pakistan. As you know, they'll get it figured out one way or another. Is he warming up to Pakistan? Is that a statement against terror? How do you just read that statement and the stand of the United States?
Well, I think Donald Trump has a way of trying to please everybody, and in any given statement, he can say several things, many of which are contradictory. I can only go back to the historical precedent, what happened in 2019, and I think if he had the same advisors around him today as he did then, you'd get the same response. But it's very hard to predict with this group what they will be saying to him, and I wish I could be clearer on that, because I do think that it's India, it's the people in Kashmir, and obviously the tourists who were killed, who are the victims here, and they deserve justice on their behalf.
Do you see China, Pakistan getting help from China and many other countries in case there is military retaliation from India?
Well, I think that's obviously a risk, and that's something that the government of India has to take into account. But it also seems to me the U.S. And India as well should be telling China, look, you have influence in Pakistan, and you ought to do more. You, Beijing, ought to do more to tell the Pakistanis that allowing these terrorist groups safe harbor inside Pakistan is unacceptable. China itself has experience with terrorism, and in the governments they're close to, if they're committed to stopping international terrorism, they should be applying their diplomatic skills to make that happen.
Well, I know what you're saying is the right thing. I do hope Pakistan does get its act together on terror. But yes, it's frustrating, and the record of the last 25, 30 years, not too much to go by. Terror networks have existed in Pakistan, continue to exist, and probably the biggest export from Pakistan are their terrorists who keep multiplying, in geometric progression. But clearly, we live in difficult times, and right now, reading any country on where they stand becoming the biggest challenge. But thank you very much, Mr. Bolton, for joining me on the Newshour. It's always a pleasure to have you and to get an understanding of how you're looking at the situation.
Well, thank you very much. Let's keep our fingers crossed here.